So let's go ahead. We'll get started. So hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to my session today. I am Jennifer Gibson, and you are at Orlando Code Camp. And thanks for starting your day with me. We are... Oh, I thought I just saw someone. Somebody told me that I should add a slide about myself. So while I'm not big into talking about myself, I will do it. So you may have seen from my Code Camp bio that I am a glitter enthusiast. I love glitter. It's no lie. Actually, the best part about adding this slide was because it let me add glitter to my presentation. But regardless of that, a little more useful information about me is that I maybe followed a bit of a unique path to get here. I actually have a degree in sociology, and I'm not going to age myself, but I had a whole career before I started software development. I worked in human resources for many years, and I'm actually a certified senior professional in human resources, which is a certification I worked really hard for, and I'm never going to let it die. In fact, actually, when Code Camp is over, I have to go get back to my recertification credits because it's due. And so I did that for a while, and then my career reached a transitional phase, and after a particularly rough open enrollment season, I'm sure we're all familiar with the fun of open enrollment, I thought to myself, do I want to do this forever? And so, hi, come on in. And so I attended in 2018 the UCF Web Development Bootcamp. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun. I loved my teachers and my teachers' assistants. And from there, my wonderful boss, who I am not just gassing up because he's present, decided to take a chance on me, and he gave me a job, and I've been there ever since. And I'm at CyberMedics, and most of my projects work with Blazor, Angular, .NET, and WPF. And that's how we got here today. Was anybody here for my talk last year? No? Perfect. We could just skip this slide.
Almost.
So last year, we'll go back. I talked about using Blazor in Angular projects. We'll run over it real quick. Here's the link we actually have a video of it last year on our website. They added support in .NET 7 for custom elements. So Blazor components could be registered as custom elements. We walked through how to set it up and how to send parameters. One thing of note is that whole object parameters required an extra JavaScript file, and you had to use JavaScript syntax, and it was pretty annoying. The downsides were that you can't send data back to Angular, and there was some really finicky casing rules on that. So that's just a summary of last year. Last year, we also played Mad Libs. I have some devastating news for you guys, and we will not be playing Mad Libs this year. But we will be doing trivia with Candy. So we're still going to have fun. And that was just last year. It's just a quick summary. Like I said, you don't need to have attended to understand what's going on today. We're going to get the information-heavy talking part out of the way first before we look at some code samples. So just bear with me as I get all the info out, and then we'll have some more fun. WPF stands for Windows Presentation Foundation and is a free EUI framework for Windows-based desktop applications. It was first released in 2006. WPF uses XAML for its user interface elements, which is a declarative XML-based markup language. The code behind and behavior is done in C#, so I'm sure it's pretty familiar to us here at Code Camp. WPF projects are deployed as standalone Microsoft desktop programs, and the link to the docs is here, but if you can't get all that down fast enough, a little Google search will bring it right up. On the other side, we have Blazor, which is a client-side framework and development platform. However, Blazor has server-side and client-side rendering, and now it has Blazor Hybrid as well. Blazor uses .NET and C#, which allows you to make great web apps without JavaScript. It is a cross-platform language, and because it uses C#, it's strongly typed. The nice thing about using Blazor is that if you already work with .NET, it's going to be super familiar. And it can be used with other Microsoft projects like WPF, as we'll see today, mobile development, even Angular. and like the newer .NET MAUI. Blazor uses components, which are small pieces of reusable code, and much like the other one, the link is right here, but Google will bring it up. As we know, Microsoft, which these are both Microsoft products, has been a longtime leader in tech, so we expect both of these to stick around for a while. I do want to take a moment to talk about the different Blazor hosting models. So before Blazor Hybrid, there was Blazor server-side and Blazor WebAssembly. Here you'll see a comparison chart from Microsoft, and you can find all of this information at that site too. Got to give you good sources. Server-side runs in ASP.NET Core, which is good for download size and is easier to debug on the server. WebAssembly runs client-side in the browser on a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime, which does have a larger download size. All WebAssembly's UI and events are executed on the browser's UI thread, whereas server-side uses SignalR and WebSockets to do so. WebAssembly can use web APIs and it is possible to do a serverless deployment, while server-side has no offline support and a higher latency. Now we have Blazor Hybrid as well. Blazor Hybrid was officially introduced with .NET 7, and you can use it on any version of .NET after 7. Similar to the other render modes, it uses Razor components, but it is hosted in native mobile and desktop apps. Hybrid runs in the native app along with any .NET code and renders to an embedded web view. You lost my spot. With Blazor Hybrid, you have full access to native client capabilities, so you can use it with hardware, like scanners or label printers. But you do still need separate apps for each platform, like a mobile app as well. Native client apps do typically take a bit longer to find, download, and install. At this point, Blazor's become really versatile, so you're probably able to find the Goldilocks Blazor for your project. But today we are going to talk about Blazor Hybrid. So one more thing to get through, and that is the why. So why would somebody want to do this? Well, why? We could just use WPF. You could just use Blazor. So let's cover a couple reasons. Hey, come on in. There's a few good reasons. The first reason is legacy systems. Sometimes we do encounter outdated systems that are still in use and we need to add new functionality. We can use Blazor to add fresh new code, new components, and better functionality to bring it modern. I also personally think that a lot of the focus now is in web development. So being able to use Blazor in desktop apps will allow more and newer developers to work on legacy code like that. The next reason is one of the really cool things about component-based development in Blazor Hybrid, and that is reusability. You can build out components to be used across multiple places, across platforms. Since one of the Blazor Hybrid downfalls is that you do need separate apps for each device, you can build one component and reuse it in each app, so it will help cut development time. So for example, we had a client project where we needed to show a report in the WPF app, but we also needed to show that report in the web-based reporting feature. So we just built one component and we could serve it in both. And so it was really convenient. The next reason is that Blazor might just be a better fit for a small piece, or you just want to try it out, to be honest. We started using Blazor Hybrid in that aforementioned WPF app in like the middle of last year. The app needed to be connected to label printers, scanners, and even some scales. So we needed the serial port access of WPF. But I will wholeheartedly admit it, my WPF design skills are not great.
Most developers are in the same boat.
Yeah, they don't look good, but I can spin up something in Blazor much faster and it's going to look a lot prettier. So like I can make it look nice. We get those serial port access. So it's just a better fit for us to put out a, better looking product. And then finally, you might be saying to yourself, like, Jen, Blazor Hybrid is like Electron. Why wouldn't I use Electron? Especially the .NET wrapper for Electron. And to be honest, you could use it. We get to choose what we use-ish. But Electron still requires Node to use, even the .NET version. which Blazor Hybrid does not. Electron applications tend to be much heavier with a lot to download. And additionally, Electron is considered much slower. Full honesty though, I've never built anything with Electron. This is just some research I've done. So if you have, you might like it better. And those are kind of the different reasons why we would want to use Blazor Hybrid. From here, we are going to get into the fun stuff, which is the how of to do this. So thanks for sticking with me through all the information heavy features. We're going to use Visual Studio Community, and it's pretty simple to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through creating an app from scratch together. And then I have another one that I've added for some more demos within it. So we'll look at that as well to get a little bit more complicated. The minimum requirements here are you need .NET 7 or greater, .NET Framework 4 or greater, Visual Studio 2022 with the .NET Desktop development workload installed. Today we are going to be using .NET 9, but as I said, you can use .NET 7 or greater. So for the basic setup, you just want to create a new project, and there is a WPF application template that you can use. Mine is here in recent project templates, which I'm sure you can guess why. But you could just search for it if you don't have it, and then you'll follow the wizard to get everything set up. And then let's go ahead and look at project. Okay, the first place that we are going to start is with the NuGet packages. This screen is just a little small, but the other ones are bigger. I just couldn't change the sizing on this screen. So you only need 2 to get started. You need the Microsoft ASP.NET Core.components.webview.wpf package and the dependency injection package. I do want to point out here, so in this one, we're using version 9.0.5 of the WebView WPF. You need to use the version that matches whatever version of .NET you're using. Like I said, in this one, I'm using .NET 9, so we're using version 9. But if you're using 8, you want to use one of the 8 versions. I found this out the hard way because I tried to use the most recent package in .NET 8, and I figured out that it didn't work. So everything I'm telling you today, I've learned the hard way. Once those are installed, we are going to come to the CS project file. The basic WPF app at the top is going to have this project SDK, which is Microsoft.NET.SDK. The only change that we need to make up here is we need to add .razor at the end of that to let it know we're going to be including Razor components. And so we need to do that. And then the other thing that we need to do is add the root component element here. And in there, we just put in WPF. Well, this is WPF app 1, but the project's name. I do want to point out that in the Microsoft tutorials and everything for this, it does mention that this root component element addition is a workaround for a current issue where the root component is not getting set during build. But that issue was noted in 2022, and the last I saw, it was still in the backlog of March 2024. So take with that information what you will. But today we're going to add the root component in there. From here, we need to add the imports file, which if you're familiar with Blazor, I'm sure you've seen the imports file before. So we just added a Razor component. We took everything out of it. And all we need is the using tag for Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.web. It's really simple file. That's all we need. From there, we add the www root folder, which is there. Within it, we have the CSS and the index.html file. The index file, I'm going to be totally straightforward with you. I copy-pasted this straight from Microsoft. It's the fastest way to get started, and you can do it too. The only things I want to point out here is the link to the CSS file. Make sure that's right. And then we have our Blazor errors in here. Down here, there's the startup script for Blazor. Server-side, WebAssembly, and Hybrid have their own separate startup scripts. So if you're working with server side, it's going to say blazor.server.js. If you're working with WebAssembly, it'll say blazor.webassembly.js, and Blazor Hybrid uses WebView. So it's me the WebView.js to use it. From there, we just have a really basic CSS file. The only thing that might look familiar, I mean, it's all basic, but we've got the CSS in here for the Blazor yellow error bar of doom, if you're familiar with that. If you're not familiar with it, I'm very jealous. And so it's just basic. I also copy this from the Microsoft docs. It's just the fastest way to get started sometimes. Finally, we just need a Razor component. So I have added in a really basic Razor component. There's no code, there's a hello, a thank you, and there is a note to myself to remember to show you guys something that I kept forgetting when I was doing this. And you'll see it now because I have the reminder in there. From here, that's all we need. So we're just gonna put it all together, and let's start in the XAML code behind. So you need to add in a using tag for the dependency injection package. And then we're going to look at a couple different things in the code behinds today, and they're all going to happen after the initialize component call. So if you're working on this, always do whatever you're doing after initialize component. We'll create a service collection, and then within it, we're going to add the WPF Blazor WebView. When you're doing this, be careful because, Visual Studio likes that predictive stuff. And there's so many different versions of this that you can add. There's literally one that just says add Blazor WebView. So make sure that you've picked the one that says WPF. And then we're also going to add in this Blazor WebView developer tools. Developer tools are not required to make this work. But with Blazor in web development, we're really used to having those Chrome or Edge dev tools, and WPF does not have that. But we can add this service, and we will be able to access that in WPF. So that's a really useful assistant. And then we're just going to add our service collection to the page resources, and we're going to call it services. And that's all we have to do on this end. On the UI side, the first thing we need to do is we have this XML-NS. I found out while I was doing this that stands for XML namespace. The whole time I've been working on this, in my head I just go XML. So now I know what it stands for, so I'm going to enunciate it for you. And we're going to call it Blazor, and we're going to set it equal to the CLR namespace of the package that we installed. So it's the Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.webview.wpf. And then we have right after it the assembly, which is the exact same thing. There's a little gotcha here if you, as I mentioned earlier, the predictive stuff that Visual Studio likes to do. If you're just tabbing through to get it in there, which is fine, you could totally do that. It does not put this .wpf here on the namespace, so just make sure to add it in because I've not added it in and said, why isn't this working? So you want to add it in. And then we just have the local namespace, which is your app. That one's auto-generated, but it is useful. Onto the code, we have a regular XAML grid. And then within the grid, we reference that Blazor namespace. So it's Blazor WebView. And on here, we tell it where the host page is, which is our index.html page we set up. And then we tell it what services to use. So it's a dynamic resource, and we referenced that service collection that we made and called services. From there, we have Blazor WebView root components, and then within that is the Blazor root component. You need this selector on it for it to work. This is just a really basic default hash app. You can call it what you want, but it does need a selector. And then after that, you just tell it the component type. So it uses this X type reference here, which is kind of like the type of function in C#. And then you're saying a local file, which is this local namespace, and then the name of your Razor component. So we called ours Code Camp, and that's all you need to do. So we are ready to run our app now. And I'll just go ahead and start it. And you will see our Razor component with the hello, the thank you, and the note to self is now running. given the note to self, I want to show you the dev tools that we added in there. The really personally irritating thing about the dev tools is that nothing on this screen is going to change whether you add them or not. The top part, there's nothing extra up there. You're going to have no idea you did it unless you've done it. So what you do to open them is you want to put your mouse over where the component is and you just hit Control-Shift-I. And it's going to open the dev tools up and it looks just like it would in the browser. You have the elements, the CSS, the console, the network tab. So that's the really convenient dev tools feature. Control-Shift-I, yeah. So that is our basic startup. Do we have any questions before I go on to anything more advanced? I probably have time for like one or two. Yep.
Blazor component view. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any that?
Well, it'll just
Explain the thing when you hit the Blazor.
Well, that demo wasn't the best, but it can be prettier. And there's a few different things you can do with it. It's just whether or not you think it's something that you need for your project.
If you use the developers, even the best.
Sorry?
The one with good thing is using the developer, Chrome developer.
Yeah.
This is the desktop application.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that they added that. I'm glad that they did. Yeah.
Does it support MDDL?
Yes.
It does. Okay. Just started doing call behind.
Yeah, our one of our client apps uses MVVM with Blazor, so this is just a real basic one. Yeah. Okay, so we will go back to, don't look at my notes though. We'll go back to our slides for just a minute. Okay, we've gone through all of this. You gotta have the backup slides just in case. All right, so now that we've covered the basics of how to create and start your Blazor Hybrid app, we're gonna get a little bit more complex with real life applications. So the first thing I wanna talk about is if you are building a WPF application that has a bunch of pages and windows in it, and you wanna use Razor components in all of them, it's gonna get really annoying if you have to do that service collection on every single page. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set it once, and we're gonna use it through the whole app. So we will go back over. Okay, perfect, here we are. So this is the app.xaml code behind. So this is for the whole app. And what we need to do here is you do need another package for this, which is the Microsoft Extensions hosting package to get this going. And then so we've got a static variable of iHost called apphost set here. And then underneath, we've just created a function that takes in a service collection and returns a service collection called configure services. And within that function, we're setting those two same services that we did before, the add WPF Blazor web view and the add Blazor web view developer tools. And we're just returning those services. And then here in the app constructor, when it starts up, it's going to create the builder and it's going to call the configure services in our little function there. And then it's going to build the app. And you can now use your Blazor throughout the whole thing without having to add all the services on every file. The only other thing that you need to do is you do need to reference those services just a little bit differently. So you can see here on the services where we set up before, instead of a dynamic resource of services, we're going to bind it to the app host services path. And the source is just going to be the current instance of the application. So it's application.current. And that's the only other change that you need to make, and you are good to go throughout the app. So this, I'm actually going to go ahead and run our sample application. We're going to keep it running. You can see on here, I've got it set up. We're going to have 3 little demos with 3 trivia questions. So 3 chances to win some candy. The first thing I do want to cover. So our first demo, it's probably called Blazor Hybrid for the most obvious reason. It's two different technologies in one. But I think another reason, in my opinion, that it could be called a hybrid is that on your pages, you don't have to just pick. Like, it doesn't have to be WPF and it doesn't have to be Blazor. You can have both. So on here, we've got the regular XAML grid control, and then I've added some row definitions in here. And you can see here's our Blazor, and I've used regular XAML markup to set it to row 1. And then down here, let me scroll down a little bit. We've got a stack panel control, and using the XAML markup, we have it set to grid row 0. So actually, when we look at this, these are going to be reversed. But now we have XAML and the Razor component in one page. Which brings us to our first trivia question before we run it, which is, we're starting off really easy. But how many years has Orlando Code Camp been happening? What annual Code Camp is this? Do we have any guesses?
17.
17? We have, who says 17? Well, I think everybody says 17. All right, well, let's find out. 17th annual Orlando Code Camp. So actually, I think everybody gets lollipops. So we're all winners here. And you can see here is our Razor component, and just says today is the answer annual code camp. So we saw that in the XAML. We have the question, which is in the WPF, and the answer, which is in the Razor component. So we'll do lollipops at the end because you all got that one. So from here, our next demo is we are going to talk about parameters, which are like kind of an essential part of development, right? We need to be able to use parameters. So I do want to start this one with the Razor component. You can see here we have a header that's visible all the time. So that's question 2. Then we have 2 parameters on here. One is a string called question 2, and the second one is a string called answer. And then here, as soon as question 2 has a value, it's going to show the question and the answer. So it's going to reveal both at the same time. And that's just our component. On the XAML page, here I've added on our root component a name to the component, which is just the very creative root component. You can name it whatever you want. As you can tell, I really flexed my creative juices on that one and just called it root component. And that's all you need to do in the XAML page. From here, we'll go to the code behind. And again, it's after the initialize component call. So we can pass parameters of a dictionary type string and a nullable object to that root component element. The key for each of them is the same name as the parameter. So we had the parameter question 2 and the parameter answer. I've played with this a little bit, and the casing doesn't really seem to matter. You could be lowercase, you could be camel case, but I do think it is kind of a best practice that they should match. And so we have our next trivia question, which is that Lake Eola in downtown Orlando was originally what? Do we have any guesses?
Sinkhole.
A sinkhole? Anybody else? All right, let's find out. So we're going to pass the parameter and the answer into our Razor component. And you're right, it was a sinkhole, which is, totally not terrifying at all. As I understand it now, apparently most lakes in Florida used to be sinkholes, so I don't know why I moved here. So that is parameters. But I do actually, I'm going to go back to the slideshow for the next one. So we might encounter where we want to send data back. So we're sending parameters via into the Razor component, but sometimes you might want to send information back to WPF. This is cool that you can do it because as we did that quick summary of last year's Angular talk, even though you guys weren't here, we could not send information back to Angular. So now we can send it back and forth. So let's go ahead and this one, however, there's a lot of Got it. There's a lot of back and forth between files. So I've got kind of a little chart that I want to look at with you guys first before we dive in. Okay, we've seen this. Okay. So we can do this using a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you the most basic one today, but it will kind of, as your app grows, it could get kind of messy, but this is just a basic demonstration. We're going to add in a new file, and it's just a static class called data state. That's what I named it. And it's got a reference here to demo3, which is the Blazor component, and a reference to demo3 WPF, which is the XAML page. So here we have our little data sharing diagram. I hope this makes it clear. It's hard to tell what's going to work for everybody. So we have our WPF on the left side, and then within that is our Blazor component, which is kind of zoomed in over here. And then in the middle between these two, we have the data state class. So when each of these starts up, we are going to set those references to each of them on the data state class equal to the current instance of that. On the WPF, we are going to have a little button that says show me the trivia question. So we click that, it's going to send the trivia question to the Blazor component with this go-between. It's going to use that reference on the data state class, and it's going to set the trivia question on the Blazor component. When it displays the trivia question, it's also going to have a button that says tell me the answer. When you click that button, it's going to send the answer back through that data state class. It's going to reference a function that is in the WPF code behind that will then set one of the XAML controls equal to the answer. So we're initializing, we're sending, and then we're sending back. So let's look at it. It is some back and forth. Hopefully that helped make it a little bit clearer as we look at it. So here is the data state class that you saw on the PowerPoint. So it's just got the two references to those files. Let's start with the XAML code behind. So on the constructor here, after we've initialized the component, we've set that demo3 WPF reference equal to the current instance of it, which is this. And then over here on the Blazor side, we use the onInitialize lifecycle event to also set the demo3 reference equal to the current instance. From here, we'll look at the XAML. So you can see we have a button here that has send parameter click event on it that says view the trivia question. And then underneath that, we just have a text block control, and we've given it the name return text. So when we click that send parameter button, it's going to use that reference to the Blazor component on the data state class, and it's going to send the trivia question. You can get a little teaser of the beginning of it there. And then so here on the Blazor page, we just have a variable for the question with a setter on it. So whenever the question 3 value changes, it's going to call state has changed, which lets the Blazor component know that it needs to re-render because something's changed and it needs to show it. As you could see up here, once that question 3 has a value, it's going to show the question, and it's also going to show a button that says get answer. The on-click is get answer. And then underneath, when you do that function, using the XAML reference on the data state class, it's calling the receive parameter function, and it's passing in the answer. Back on the code behind, we can see the receive parameter function, and it's taking in a string, and then it's setting the text of that return text block that we saw on the XAML front equal to the answer. So as a quick reminder, here's our text block, and we named it return text. So that's how it's setting it. And that's pretty much it. Are we ready to do the last trivia question? This is my favorite one. Let's see if you guys can get it. So here's our button in the XAML. We're going to click it. It's kind of small. I'll read it to you. So, it's small in here too. On October 5th, 1991, the old Orlando City Hall was imploded with the new City Hall just 4 feet behind it. In order to offset the cost of the demolition, Orlando sold film rights of the explosion to Hollywood for $50,000. The explosion was in the opening scene of Blank, released in 1992. Do we have any guesses? Any lifelong Orlandoans that know the answer? You know, I practiced this at like a company event and I thought nobody was going to get it. And one of my coworkers got it. And he's lived in Orlando his whole life. And I was like, man, I thought I really had a stumper. But, you know, maybe I do. Okay, are you ready to know the answer? It's Lethal Weapon 3.
Really?
I don't know, is it really?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The green wire, no, the blue wire.
Yeah, exactly. So it's Lethal Weapon 3. So from there, we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. I love that trivia question, if we can get this. I didn't know it until I started doing this. So I'm not going to play it now, but I am happy to provide. If you want to use the QR, you can see the opening scene. It's on YouTube. Another fun fact about this is there's a man at the end who's dressed as like a first responder, and he does this like really slow clap and just says bravo, like very sarcastically. That man is actually Bill Frederick, who was the mayor of Orlando at the time. So I just thought that was like a really fun fact. So I do want to say this though. I want to take it back to the data state class. It is a really simple solution for sharing data. I picked that one up when I was first navigating my way through this using Blazor Train tutorials. If you guys aren't familiar with Blazor Train, I would check it out because he does really great videos on like everything that has to do with Blazor. But I will say it is very simple, and as your app gets more complicated, it could get kind of messy. So a better pattern might be to turn it into a service and inject it and kind of share data that way. So these are my 3 little demos that we've covered here, and we've got the basics down. We were unable to kind of cover navigation today, but you should be able to do navigation with either that data state class or the service as well. I do want to leave you with the downside. Everything's got a downside, right? I haven't had as many struggles with WPF and Blazor as I have had with Blazor and other things like Angular. Maybe that's because here we have 2 Microsoft products versus Microsoft and Google, but I don't really know. I do want to say, so my first foray into WPF Blazor Hybrid was for a client project, which is a really large solution. It has several projects in it, and it keeps growing, which is great. But we added this in later, and so it's important when you're developing to keep project structure in mind, because we ended up not being able to use like a data state class or a service because we had cyclical project references that were erroring. So we had to kind of find a different solution, which, you know, is not a total downfall, but it will derail you really fast, and you need to find a workaround. Which here I just have like a little chart if you're not familiar. It's like WPF was referencing the Blazor project. The Blazor project was referencing the services, but we couldn't put in the services because it couldn't circular reference Blazor. And so it was a whole thing. So that's one of them. And then one of the other great benefits that we've talked about is easily reusing the components in different platforms to cut development time. But on the other hand, if you do need a companion app for like a mobile device or a tablet, you know, something like .NET MAUI may be more better suited for that because it's like a one and done, which I plan to try next. So maybe come back next year.
I'm currently working with MAUI.
Yeah, do you like it?
Really? It's XAML-based,
Yeah.
but on the iPhone, it renders interestingly.
Oh.
So I have a demo that one top rated.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. But besides that, there are probably more downfalls, as with everything. But like I said, I really haven't encountered many. Of course, the biggest one is that there's no more trivia questions and our time is up. So with that, I open the floor. Do we have any other questions? Do? Sure.
I kind of started diving into something like this. Console app that I wanted to try writing live code. And one of the things that I need to do and I kind of struggle with is had put on the back burner was doing like a file picker type thing, because Blazor was like web component app. I think how do I get this file over to my backend, which is on a service, .NET service and everything. I couldn't find like the link between that. They were done with like some of these web components moving over to.
We have done a file picker in Blazor, but we haven't done a file picker in Blazor in WPF. So from experience, no, it could be possible.
Specifically getting font back for that. Yeah. Well, I guess, I don't know, it's been a lost that last year that I was playing around with this, but I saw this site and I was like, no, I've got to try and do something with this, and I get stuck on something. And that's what I can remember I was getting stuck on, but it was definitely something that, it wasn't set up like this, so I might have had like, some bad tutorials that I was trying to follow to get everything set up. So maybe there was just some disconnect in something that was working. I was getting running, but I was having a lot of communication.
Yeah.
The two sides.
I feel like you could get it with Blazor, and from there you'd probably be able to send it to the back end. I will say with this, when we have back end, we do kind of have to do like the API and send it that way. I feel like you could do it, right?
Right. Depending on the project type that you select. So maybe there's a server. Let's track. They can track stream the file and also does any connection instruction to you.
Yeah.
Actually use like a traditional warp submit to get the file back. Where there's we use tower component.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah.
It's just set up really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can use Tolerate for Blazor in your Razor component in WPFs.
A company will buy that because we're not doing anything in Blazor right now, but if this is like a side project that we wrote in a console app just to get streamlining out the door. But there are so many inputs into it now. I'm like, I'm the one that basically in charge of running this part. The customer I need to run this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just tired of writing batch files to .bat files to get this things up for everything that I need to do. I'm like, I just want some kind of UI to tag on this thing.
Yeah, I would too, definitely.
So it's been like, I don't have time to work on it, company time.
Yeah.
Like if I have a few cycles here and there, I'll go along at it, but nothing official that I can work on. We don't have any funding for like components or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Drink Blazor or something else. I was just trying to do with Blazor. Just might end up eventually posting this, but right now it's just side project console app.
Yeah.
One thing.
Sure.
So great thing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me later. Like collecting any good Blazor. And don't care could do everything. But
Well, yeah, you could do the same thing with Razor with web views.
what? So why need later? Don't care.
I mean, you don't have to use it. It's a cool thing to use. I mean, so for me, I really liked using it because my output it looks a lot better. I think it's a better end user experience because it's prettier. So that's like my biggest reason for using it. You can, if you're trying to move something out of WPF, you could start slowly doing it by adding in Razor components and do it that way. It's just whether or not it works for you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay. Any more questions? Yeah.
Of course. You were talking about Blazor being a good option for like.
Mm-hmm.
Could you touch a little more on that? Right now, I'm talking to one from like, yeah, let's see some spec with Blazor.net. We live in a library that got the crowd system, the cross platform system. We're in this middle of the road where we don't know if we want to got it now. Well, entirely So could you touch?
Maui, Blazor works with Maui.
Yeah, it does. And Maui is a cross-platform, so I think probably you would want to use Maui. Yeah.
Maui is cross-platform, but it's not perfect. Clearly so.
For Linux, those are more Linux. What they mean?
Right. First,
What they mean? You said no.
the pain I have experienced is if you're supporting Android and iOS and Windows and Mac all in the same big thing, and you want everything to always run on all machines, you can't, because iOS can only build on a Mac. So right there, you're already limited, and you, with the divorce between Microsoft and Apple, I do not like Visual Studio Code. I'm opinionated enough. We have an IDE. That's what I want to use. So writer or still keep using Visual Studio on the Mac if you can find it. Also, it seemed like Android libraries will always throw an error. Luckily, I don't have to support Android, so I just comment that out the whole section. But when I was first setting it up, it was like, everything's working except Android. I'm not using Android. Just comment everything out, everything. It's also a different flavor of XAML, a different dialect of XAML. Not everything is exactly WPF XAML in Maui. I do like it that it doesn't force you to do MVVM unless you want to, so that's nice. And then the rest are basically just the UI rendering and in the native and what it's going to look like. And you got to have a device. You got to have something that you test it up, make sure it works. But I liked it, but I also did it faster on a straight WPF as a Windows tablet, for a Windows tablet app, and the WPF just went a lot faster.
Is the ultimate and a Maui then Playbook?
Right?
Is there any on the friend thing?
Avalonia is supposed to be similar to Maui, but I haven't tried it yet. And the other one I was looking at was Uno Project. But we had specific requirements for authentication, and Uno Project didn't do it. So it's like, okay, Maui.
Is that for so that?
That's the Maui successor. And some of the libraries are still, have the word Xamarin in them, but it's all Maui.
But it's still like support first. Appreciate that.
I believe.
So you could try Maui, as it is a cross-platform. Thank you for the summary. That was really helpful. But you could also do, as it sounds like it has its limitations, you could do Blazor and make those Razor components and then do separate projects for each platform and then reuse them, as we talked about the reusability of the components earlier. Just whatever you guys decide, but you can do it multiple ways.
Yeah, I think the reason Blazor comes into this is that you have web, you can even show your app on web, and other those things to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the WPF, and now it's just device specific. So you build Blazor.
It's the web view, yeah.
To use it through all of these installable apps via this hybrid model. So have a web that's their Blazor. You can build it first through web and then use it.
Yeah.
Okay, UI.
One of the good things about Blazor is the offline feature that you can leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work with WPF?
Everything runs in the WPF application, so it's hosted native, but if you need like a backend or something, it wouldn't work offline. All right, so with that, we are out of time and we've reached the end of our session today. I want to thank you all for coming, and then be sure to come see us at the CyberMedics table in the lobby. We come say hello, and we're giving away a pair of Meta Ray-Bans with the raffle at the end of the day. So come see us as well to sign up for your chance to win. And then everybody take your lollipop since you all know what annual code camp it is. And take all the lollipops you want. I only bought them for this. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Baby,